Today I'm going to show you two different ways to sew Drunkard's Paths quilt blocks. We're going to have one with pins and one without. Okay, so we're going to start with the standard way first, and what we're going to do is just fold each of the A and B pieces in half and finger press to just leave a little crease, just like that. You can see the two crease points here, and then we're just going to lay them right sides together, aligning those crease points so that they are on top of each other. And making sure that that gap there is fairly even on both sides, just because we don't want it like that. That's an exaggerated version, but we want to make sure that this corner is right on top of this corner and these creases are on top of each other. Then we're going to pin it in place. Okay, we're then going to take this end, fold it round, line it up to the raw edges so that they are on top of each other. They're nicely aligned, and then we're going to pin that in place. Then we're going to take the other side, do the same thing again, and pin that in place. Just make sure it's all nicely lined up. And before we go to our sewing machine, that is what it should look like. We've got 3 pins, one at the start, one in the middle, one at the end, and then we will take it to our sewing machine and sew that together. Okay, we're at our sewing machine, we're ready to sew, and we're going to sew along this curve here where we pinned with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to start up here where the first pin is. We're going to lay it under our sewing machine and put the needle down along this top edge, 1/4 inch away from this curved raw edge. Now that needle is in, I'm going to remove this pin and pop the foot down. Now we're ready to sew. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that as we sew this first section to this pin, we just gently stretch out the fabrics and bring the seams in line with each other. Bring the raw edges in line with each other, just like this. And we're going to sew along here. You can take it slowly, there's no rush. And just remember, we are just making sure that the 1/4 inch seam allowance and that these raw edges are lined up just when we're about to sew. Don't be too concerned what's happening here when you're sewing over here. It just makes it just a bit more complicated. So just remember, we're wanting what's about to go under the needle to be lined up nicely together like this, and then it's 1/4 inch away from the edge. So let's sew. As you're sewing, make sure you push the crinkled fabric out of the way. We don't want to catch anything and cause any pleats. As we come up to this pin, we can remove it. Just hold down the next part there like that, and just keep sewing with your 1/4 inch. You can see that what I'm doing now is just working on the next part to make sure that's all lined up like that, and we're just going to keep going. That's getting a bit crunkly, so I'm just going to move it out of the way. If you need to, leave the needle down, put the foot up, and just smooth that excess fabric out of the way. this is what it will look like. The next way to do it is the no pin method. So we're just going to take our 2 pieces and lay them right sides together so that they look like this. And then we're going to just sew along this curve on the sewing machine without pinning. I say that, I've got 1 pin. I'm just going to hold it together to make sure these raw edges here align. Just so that while we're carrying it to our sewing machine, it doesn't flip and go in the wrong place. It holds it exactly how we want to so that we're ready to sew up here. So we're back at the sewing machine. The process is exactly the same. We're going to sew along this curve here by bringing it in line this raw edge with this raw edge. So we're going to do the same thing as we did the first time. Just bring our needle down right at the top, about 1/4 inch from the edge. Once that needle's in, we can remove our first pin, if you even have one there. And then we're just going to move the fabrics so that they are raw edges aligned together as we sew 1/4 inch from that edge. We're just going to slowly do it as we move around. And we're only just going to worry about what's about to be sewn. So we don't have to worry about this lot lining up when we're back here. If you need to, you can lift the foot up. Try not to overstretch the fabrics. We just want those raw edges meeting up. So this is what they look like when they're done. I like to press my seams out towards this part, and I have trimmed it down to the required size for the pattern. As you can see, they both look very similar, and you're doing the same thing. You're sewing along this curve here. It's just about how you like to manage the fabric when it's being sewn underneath the needle. So my recommendation is to try these both out, see which one feels best, and go from there.